Hello, welcome for chapter 2, lesson 1. In this chapter or in this lesson, we will be looking at atoms, ions, and molecules. We will be looking at atoms, ions, and molecules. The key concept here is that all living things are based on atoms, and their interactions. This means that all living organisms are made of atoms. All living organisms are made of atoms, which of course, as we will be looking into the details, is the smallest or the basic unit that makes up all matter. The basic unit that makes up all matter. Here we will, all the main ideas for this unit will include, living things consist of atoms of different elements. Living things consist of atoms of different elements. That is 1. 2. Ions form when atoms gain or lose electrons. And 3. Atoms share pairs of electrons in covalent bonds. So we will be looking at each of them single-handedly. We will first look at what living things are made of, and that is atoms of different elements. And 2, we will look at what are ions, and we will look at what are atoms, how do atoms gain or lose electrons, then how do atoms share electrons. We will all look at all these. So we will go directly to the definitions here. So when we are looking at this, we see that every physical thing you can think of, whether living or non-living, is made of incredibly small particles. So every physical thing. So when we are talking of physical thing, we are basically talking of both the living and the non-living things. So we talk of every physical thing, whether living or non-living, whether living or non-living, is made of incredibly small particles. So we will be basing ourselves in these. These small particles are called atoms. Small particles called atoms. Small particles called atoms. So an atom is the smallest basic unit of life. An atom is the smallest basic unit of life. An atom is the smallest basic unit of matter. Basic unit of matter. Matter here meaning both the living and the non-living things. So everything that you see around you is made of matter. So all atoms share the same basic structure. So all atoms share the same, they share the same basic matter, which we will be looking at shortly. So atoms consist of small particles, as I have said, and these particles include protons, neutrons, and electrons. Protons, neutrons, and electrons. Protons and neutrons form the dense center of an atom. So if we take a picture of what an atom is, it is not this shape, it should be circular. Here we are just creating a model of what it will look like. So this is what it would look like. This is what it would look like. So when we look at it, it will look something like this. So in the middle, we will have what we are calling the neutrons and the protons. And around it, we will be having the electrons. Around it, we will be having the electrons. So this is a basic structure which was discovered or brought by a scientist, Bohr. We will be looking at all those details later on. So we have said that the center of the atom is made of the neutrons and protons. Then electrons, which are much smaller particles, move round in the nucleus. So protons have positive charge. Protons have a positive charge, and electrons have a negative charge. Normally, it is just basic knowledge that in order for an atom to be in a neutral state, then the number of positively and negatively charged particles should be equal. The number of positively charged and negatively charged particles in this atom will be equal. If we go through this small video here, you will see that everything in our life is matter. We mean, if you want to have a party, for example, you will have to invite people. You will prepare the party, you will bring every stuff, you will bring foodstuffs, you will bring, you will invite people, you will bring foodstuffs, you will bring drinks. All these are made of small particles, which we call atoms. Atoms together, when they come together, they form molecules. They form molecules. So we can have foods, stuff made of atoms, which are basically, for example, if we take a sample or an example of a can like this one, this can is made of aluminium. This can is made of aluminium, and aluminium is just a metal. Aluminium is a metal, and it is an element. It is an element. So the element aluminium makes up the vast substance or the vast particles in this can. In this can, we can present these by using letters. Aluminium can be represented, for example, by Al. Aluminium can be represented by Al. Aluminium can be represented by Al. So when we are looking at these basic things, first we have said an atom is the smallest particle of matter, the smallest particle of matter. And the next question is, what is an element then? So what is an element? So an element is one particular type of atom. Is one particular type is one particular type of atoms. So if you are having one particular type of atom, it cannot be broken down into a simpler substance by ordinary chemical means. Of course, if an element, it cannot be broken down an element cannot be broken down into simpler substances, into simpler substance. It cannot be broken down into simpler substance, and normally by ordinary chemical means. By ordinary chemical means. By ordinary chemical means. Atoms of different elements differ in number of protons they have. Atoms of different elements differ in the number of atoms that they will have. So atoms of different elements differ by the number of protons they have. Of protons they have. By the number of protons they have. All atoms of a given element have a specific number of protons. So all atoms of a given element all atoms of a given element have a specific number of protons. Have a specific number of protons. So they'll have a specific number of protons, And all atoms of a specific, of a given element will have a number of protons that can never vary. So they also don't vary. Apart from them differing in numbers, so for them to be different, it is only the different elements will differ by number. They will differ by number of protons that they have. All atoms of a given element have a specific number of protons. They'll have a specific number of protons that never vary. That never vary. That never varies. For example, let's take just an example. All hydrogen atoms have one proton. For example, all hydrogen atoms have one proton. They have one proton. All hydrogen atoms have one proton. All oxygen atoms have 8 protons. All oxygen atoms have 8 protons. These are just but examples. We have around 100 elements, and they vary in their number of protons. So depending on the number of protons, we will have different types of elements. The electrons in the atoms of each element determine the properties. This is a very important point. The electrons in the atoms, of each element determine the properties of that element. The properties of that element. So precisely, the number of electrons determines how an element will behave. For example, how it will react with different other elements in the environment and so forth. So electrons are considered to be just a cloud around the nucleus. Electrons are considered to be just a cloud around the nucleus. So if we have this as being the nucleus, for example, then around the nucleus we will have a cloud of electrons. We will have a cloud of electrons. So the exact position of electrons cannot be known. They are somewhere in three-dimensional electron cloud around the nucleus. But for understanding, we come up with models which predict or show that they have specific places. And these specific places are, they will be having specific points. These points will be regarded as electron levels. So these are called electron levels or electron shells. So we will have different electron levels or depending on the number of electrons that an atom will be having. Depending on the number of atoms, I mean a number of electrons that an atom will be having. Atoms and elements, as we have seen, are different in essence. One, elements, I mean atoms, we said, are the smallest particles of matter. And we say that electrons, I mean elements, on the other hand, is one type of atom. So when we have one type of atom which has a specific number of protons, then we regard it as being an element, and an element can vary from one to another depending on the number of protons, but its properties will also vary depending on the number of electrons that it has. So the number of electrons determines its behavior. The number of electrons determines its behavior. The electron of each element determine the properties, that is it. So electrons, we have said, are considered to be just an electron cloud that surrounds or moves around an electron. I mean that moves around the nucleus. So the nucleus, as we said earlier, is made of the protons and the neutrons. So if we look at different energy levels will have a different number of electrons. For example, the innermost electron level will have 2 electrons. The innermost energy level will have 2 electrons. Then the one that follows it will have about 8 electrons. Will have 8 electrons. Sorry, here this is supposed to be electrons. So the first energy level, 2 electrons. The second energy level, 8 electrons, and so forth. We will be discussing in details in other units. Atoms are more stable when they have a full outer energy level. So if they have, for example, if they are made of 2 electrons only, and they have the 2 electrons full, then they become stable. If they have 8 in the outer energy level and it is full, then they will be stable. They will be stable. Of the elements, of all elements that naturally occur on Earth, only around 25 are found in organisms. So out of about 91 elements that are known to exist in nature, 91 elements that occur naturally, only 25 of them are known to be found in organisms, and they include 1, hydrogen, carbon, oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen. So these ones are the macromolecules. It means they occur in great numbers in living organisms. We will be looking at the other elements that are found in living organisms in the next video.